Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I'm your host, Mike Hoffman, and today I am joined by Lorna Hollifield. Lorna, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. So for those of you watching on YouTube, Lorna is located in Charleston, South Carolina, yet for some reason she is wearing a heavy winter jacket, and she appears to be inside. So my first question is going to be, what's going on?
Okay, so I am always cold. And I've read somewhere, so I have hypothyroidism. It's not a big deal. I take Synthroid for it, but I've
Hmm?
heard that people with hypothyroidism are always cold. But I don't think it's only that. I think it's because I'm always cold because it's 68 degrees outside
Yeah,
in the middle
you
of
poor thing. I feel bad for you.
February.
68, that's awful.
In the middle of February. But I also live in an old historic house, and corners of my house downstairs always are a little chilly. I think just because it's an old house. But it's funny. My daughter, her babysitter, makes fun of me because I'm always like sitting in here freezing, and she's like, "It is so hot in here." So yeah, I'm such a southerner.
Yeah. So just to tell everyone about yourself, Lorna wears a ton of hats. She's a writer. She's released 2 novels with a third on the way. She runs her own
Yes.
publishing company. She's a promoter. She writes for a local magazine in Charleston, South Carolina, and she is a self-proclaimed hobby actor. Did I get all of it?
You got all of it. Yeah. I'm actually the managing editor of the magazine in South
There you go.
Carolina.
All right, so that's a
Yeah.
little that's a little
So,
more than being a writer. Okay, well, so we'll definitely cover that. So that's awesome.
hmm
So how are you able to wear so many hats at the same time?
well, I told you I'm always cold.
Oh, there you go. I
No.
set myself up for that. So the more hats, I guess, the better. There you go.
Yeah, no, it feels like less hats than it sounds like because it's all part of just being a creative, and
Mhm.
a lot of it doesn't feel like work to me. Um I've always been a writer since I could speak, since before I could really write, I was a writer, if that makes sense. So,
Sure.
I get very bored if I don't have a lot of projects, especially
Mhm.
if I'm not able to use my craft the way that I want to. So I feel almost bad because people look at me like, oh my God, she's this really, really, really hard worker. And I do have focus, but I kind of can't help it. Like I can't help but do all those things.
Mhm.
Um, so that's how I do it. I think it's kind of built in me a little bit. I wish I could say like, oh, if you do X, Y, and Z, like you'll be able to accomplish so much, but
Right.
it's just kind of in the fabric. Yeah.
Hey, if it works for you, it works for you. So
It does.
you started off, and I guess obviously your career has evolved, obviously, since you do so many things. But I guess in
hmm
the journey professionally, you started off as a tourism and travel blogger. So
Yep.
what was the evolution from that to actually coming up with the novels?
Okay. Well, my first novel I finished far before I was a travel and tourism
Oh,
travel and tourism blogger. I finished my first novel when I was probably 23.
mhm,
Um, it was complete crap. You will never see it. You will never read it. And I thought at the time it was genius. I was like, oh my gosh! And I'm this like young girl, and I'm going to publish, and everybody's going to be like, wow. And it was, oh my god, it was horribly rejected, and it's rightfully so. It was just so green. I didn't understand everything that went into it, and I think
sure.
that colossal kind of failure with that novel, um, it made me study more about like what I needed to do to just not just craft a story, but actually make it worthy of the market. I mean, there's a
Mhm,
lot that goes into that, and I just had to dig a little deeper. And during that time, I just wanted to write so badly. I would write anything anybody would pay me to write. And so I ran
Sure.
into this guy in town who was going around just kind of videoing cool stuff going on in Asheville. And that's where I'm from, Asheville, North Carolina. And I was like,
Hmm.
hey, I'm a writer. Let me write on your website and, write about these things that you're filming. And then the Travelocity gnome, like how Travelocity has their famous gnome and he travels around the world. He came to
Sure.
Asheville, and I just kind of like stalked them until I've run into them, and then I was like, "Hey, let me write about the Travelocity gnome and what he's doing in Asheville." And they were like, "Okay."
Good. Yeah.
And so then I started kind of being like, okay, I wrote for this website. I got to do this exclusive with Travelocity. I got to do this, that, and the other. And then people started just saying yes, because I think I believed really hard, like that I was some great, wonderful writer. So
Hmm.
when I pitched myself to people, they believed it too. And then somewhere along the way, I became that great writer. Like I wasn't kind
Yeah.
of waiting on someone to give me permission to write. I was like, pick me, pick me, pick me, ooh, ooh, ooh. And then they
Yeah.
would. And that's how, and then I wrote another novel. That one was horribly rejected. And then the third novel that I wrote got picked up.
So, what are the gists of your novels? Is it a central theme or story type, or
Um,
is it they all are they all independent of each other?
Yeah. They're all independent, and I don't really have a certain type on purpose, but they say you write what you know. I write a lot about the South. They all take place in the southern US. Even if they
Hmm.
venture other places, it's kind of grounded in the South. Um, I love I tend to write about either poor people. I grew up in Appalachia, like, outside of Asheville in the mountains, and there's kind of this that part of the South grew very differently than other parts of the South. It
Hmm.
came from hardship and people trying to find land that wasn't taken already. It was very isolated for a long time. There was a lot of poverty, but grit and people finding their place in the world. And so I tend to write about that a lot, about grit, about people having to overcome. And there's been things in my life I've had to overcome. So I think that that is kind of part of that theme. Um, but yeah, the southern US and turning over rocks and seeing the ugly stuff under them, exposing it and making it better.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to, that's kind of the common
No,
thread through
which
all
is
of
great
them.
because I've talked to a lot of writers on the podcast, and for no
Mhm.
specific reason, not that it's just kind of like that's just kind of some of the people that have
Yep.
we've decided to talk to, and it's interesting because there's
Mhm.
your different approaches to that question. You kind of wrote from where your heart is,
Oh
and
yeah.
what you
Hmm.
knew and what you wanted to talk
Hmm.
about. Whereas other writers are obviously writing about stuff that is so far from their reality. And obviously, anyone who's
Right.
writing science fiction, it's clearly so far out of the reality. Or someone who's writing,
Right.
murder mysteries. Knock on wood, they haven't experienced any murders and so forth, so they're really going out of their realm.
Yeah.
But from you,
Now
you're
mine
really
do
kind
have
of
some
doing it from your
murders.
heart. What's that?
It does come from my heart. And I have not experienced murder, thank God. But mine do have some murders here and there just to spice it up.
Yeah.
So
Well, in that case, I don't expect them to be in your next book then. So.
yeah.
But to be fair, you've done some acting, and they say a lot of actors
Mm.
that do bit acting, especially if it's TV, do end up dead on the streets of Law and Order. So
Yeah.
we were watching. There was I think the Broadway, whatever they're called, the Tonys or whatever, a few years ago, and there was this joke
Hmm.
James Corden meant about they were debating being on Broadway versus being on TV, and how people
Mm.
love
Yeah.
being on Broadway and being in live theater and so forth, but the money on TV trumps all the
Right.
enjoyment from Broadway. And at one point, he had all these Broadway stars on stage, and he turns to them and goes, basically, how many of you were corpses on Law and Order? And you see like all of them raise their hand. Because at some point they got that, that 1 day trip where they had to fly out, get all this makeup on, lay there dead, and get their union check. So
Get their SAG card. Yep.
yeah, you gotta
Yep.
pay your dues and so forth like that. So
Yep.
so now you come out with two books. Now what's the process? So to your credit, you were rejected a few times. You self-admitted, the first book was whatever it was. So now you write a
Yep.
book, and obviously it's picked up, it's published, and so forth.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now you decide, okay, I'm going to write a second one. So I'm always fascinated by this. At what point in your professional mindset do you say, okay, now it's time? Do you say, okay, it's time to write another book? Let me think of an idea, or does an idea kind of come to you and say, hey, I like this. Let me start writing and see where it goes. Like, what is your process for getting to that final product of a book?
Yeah, it comes to me. I don't go to it. But at the same time, I'm kind of always writing down ideas, and I
Mhm.
write stream of consciousness, and some of them I end up abandoning. I'm like, that's not anything. But then sometimes, I mean, it could be with my first novel that got picked up. I heard this song and I saw this character, and then it made me think of this place I was in North Carolina in the tobacco fields, and it all like bam right there, that spark, and like it had to come out of me, and I could see the whole story kind of from beginning to end, and I don't know how I'm going to get from beginning to end, but when the spark hits, I get the initial spark, I kind of see the end game, and then the rest just kind of fills in. Is how it is
Okay, so
for
you have a
me.
beginning and an
There's
ending in mind, and you kind
Yes,
of
and sometimes the ending changes a little by then, but yes,
sure.
and I kind of have a somewhere in mind I'm going with it, but then I just start writing wherever it first shows up. And then sometimes I'm like, you know what, that wasn't the beginning, and then I'll fill something else in. But
Mhm.
I start writing wherever that character showed up. I know what their journey is. And then sometimes I have to figure out a way to organize it. Cause I'm like, okay, this isn't super linear. This has to go back and forth in time. Or I'll realize like this needs two narrators. Like I'm going to have to write this from two points of view to show this.
Mhm.
And so I figure out how I'm going to structure the novel based on how it needs to be structured to be told.
Yeah.
Um, and then it just kind of all spills out. And I feel like once that spark comes, I can't get it out fast enough. Like I feel like I'm almost like anxious until it all comes out because I have it there. And um, my husband jokes, he says I go secret window. That Johnny Depp movie where he's a writer and his hair's like nasty because he
Yeah.
doesn't take a shower and he's
Mhm.
all, you know, that's me. I'm like, and people are like, oh, where do you write? And I do have this adorable library area in my house with like antique typewriters, and it's so cute. And I never write in there. I write like curled up on the couch in pajamas I've had on for 3 days, and my dog's in my lap, and my little
Right.
girl's like running around. So it's like not this glamorous setting. And I'm
Mhm.
always, I'm such a clean person except when I write. And then my husband has to be like, honey, wash your hair. Like, you gotta wash your hair. Cause I just get
They,
so into it. Yeah.
when they
So,
do the story about your life, they got to make sure they talk about your lack of hygiene during the writing process.
yeah. And now I do bathe during the writing process. I just don't wash my hair because it takes too long.
See, I don't have that problem.
I know. I should just shave my head Britney Spears
You
style
shave your head, look
during.
like me, and you can think how much more time you can spend writing. So it's interesting because,
So,
again, talking to some other writers, a lot of them have told me that one of the reasons they really enjoy the writing, and once they start writing, they can't stop the writing, is because they
hmm
want to see how the story is going to end. Because they don't know
okay.
how it's going to end until, as they're
hmm
writing it, the ending kind of just evolves as part of the process. You were a
hmm
little different, where while you said your ending might fluctuate a little bit, but for the most part, you kind of
Yeah.
have an idea where you want the story to go.
Yeah. I do. And it does. And if the ending needs to change based on something, it can. But I have an idea like where this needs to go. Um,
Mhm.
like I know if I'm going to have two characters end up together or not end up together, or somebody's going to end up dead or not dead, or something like that. I have that kind of idea. But I can't wait. The characters do some crazy stuff along the way, and sometimes
Right.
it's weird because I write it, but I was like, I don't know. They have a mind of their own. They made me do this. That's how it
Now,
feels because you get to know them and it just starts flowing.
is the characters that you're developing loosely based on people in your life? Like, your
Sometimes, um,
the protagonist could be or whatever, or the part of my friends, the bitchy girl could be the girl that you grew up with, and you're kind of loosely basing it on that person, or
Mhm.
the heroine reminds you of someone in your life.
sometimes I pull them out thin air. They are not anybody. And then sometimes they're usually not based on one person. If they're based on people, they're usually a combo for some reason of more than one. Um,
Mhm.
of more than one person. And the latest book I wrote is more. based on a very exaggerated version of myself. Very exaggerated. She's far crazier than me, but it's more kind of based off personal experiences than other things that I've written. And the main character, kind of toxic love interest in it, I named him Jet because that was my high school mascot. We were the Jets.
Mm.
And so I based him off kind of all of the bad boys I knew in high school rolled up into one guy. Like, all the heartbreakers rolled into one and called him
Sure.
Jet. So that was kind of based on that.
That makes
But it
sense.
wasn't just like one person.
And the main
Yeah.
character you said kind of based on you a little bit, so that character did not wash their hair
Yeah.
at all through the book.
She's
So you
she had some periods of time, yeah, where she did not, where she was
okay? Okay.
writing and went through some stuff. Yeah.
So without getting into specifics, obviously this is an accounting firm, podcast.
Mhm.
How for people who don't understand, how is obviously you're doing this to make money. So we'll get to your other aspects of your life in a second, but the creation of a novel and the ultimate publishing of a novel. How
Mm.
are you compensated for your time and efforts and ultimately the product that you've come up with?
Yep. First of all, I'm not doing it to make money. Sadly, I wish writers made more money. Um,
Sure.
and I shouldn't say this, hope no publisher ever sees this because it wouldn't matter. Like I could get paid nothing and I would still write it because I desperately, um, for me, I love writing and I'm an extrovert. A lot of writers are introverts. I'm a hard extrovert and I want to share it with the whole world. And that's just
Mhm.
me. But as far as I would love to be a bestseller and make millions and millions and millions, which some writers do, but I get compensated from the publishing company. So basically, when a
Mhm.
sale is made, the publishing company gets paid, and then I get paid a portion of that. And so usually everybody's deals are different, but writers usually make
Mhm.
between $1 to $3 per print book and a little bit more for a digital book because they don't
Mhm.
actually have to print anything. So you might make $4 or five
Right.
dollars
The costs are less for
per
them.
right. So
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, so it just depends on what your deal is, but that's how you get paid. And then you get paid usually a quarterly is kind of after the sales
Mhm.
reports, then the publishing company gets paid, then they pay the writer. And so that's kind of how that works. Now, if you're
And that's endless.
self-published,
So in theory, if you sell a book 5 years down the road, you'll still get that money 5 years down the road.
absolutely. I'm still getting paid on Tobacco Sun, my first novel from 2017. And sometimes, at first I was selling more books and, getting
Mhm.
paid more at a time. But now, because that's been years ago, there's been other ones since then. Sometimes I get a check for $20 or something from the sale of that book, but people
Right.
bought 20 books that quarter. So it just depends. Yeah, it's exactly like having royalties on something. Anytime it sells,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
get your cut. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
how it works.
So that's the one aspect of your life. And
Hmm.
talk to me about the publishing company.
Okay. So the Yellowbird Press was started. I don't, the Yellowbird, I don't do anything with the Yellowbird Press anymore. I didn't really enjoy that journey. There were, during COVID, I bought the rights
Mhm.
back to one of my books and put it on that label and published someone else's book and put it on that label. um
Mhm.
because it was just crazy during COVID and but it was really hard to get books picked up and I thought like, hey, I might
Yeah.
enjoy running a publishing company. I hated it with a passion. I did not like the business side
Okay.
of it. Then I felt weird trying to push my book. I felt like I should be pushing the other person's book, but yet I had put my
Yeah.
book on this label, my second book.
Mhm.
um and so it was not a good fit for me. It just wasn't the side of the business that I like. Um, I didn't like having to do all the accounting of me getting paid, then paying the writers, and then running the
Yeah.
business. My husband's in finance. So that's, business is his thing. He's a financial advisor and he loves
Yeah.
that stuff. But I felt like it pulled me away from the writing. And so that's why I decided to stop with the Yellowbird Press and move into something where I was writing more, and that's when I took the job as managing editor of Charleston Women magazine. And so that gave me, plenty of just creative space to work in. I get to decide largely what goes into the magazine. I get to tell
Mhm.
lifestyle stories on women doing really cool things in the area. And so
Yeah.
that really kind of scratched that little itch for me. And also, provided great income as a writer. If you can get something steady like that, it's few and far between. And
Mhm.
so I was really blessed, to get that, but it left me time to write my novel. And then I was so happy.
And Charleston is a very diverse town, so there's probably a lot of
Mhm.
people doing a lot of interesting things.
Charleston's a cool city.
Yeah.
It is very diverse. It's this melting pot, but yet it has these old Southern roots and it's full of charm.
Yeah.
But you can get the best Southern food ever, but then you can get every other kind of food in the world too. It's a foodie city. It's built
Yeah.
on small business and entrepreneurship, but yet the arts are huge here. Um, yeah, Charleston's a great place, and it's getting busier than ever. Traffic's terrible. Everybody wants to come here now, which I don't blame them. I
Yeah.
mean, I came from North Carolina, but it's yeah, Charleston's it's home. It's a great place.
Good place to raise a family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you do a morning show segment again, same thing, kind of highlighting,
Mhm.
you know, what I'll
Yeah.
call creators in the city.
Yeah, w- so for the past, I don't know, for about a year or so, and I just recently kind of took a little bit of a break from that. I was doing the morning show called well, my segment was called the Art Throb. It was on ABC's morning show
That's
here
good.
in Charleston called Low Country Live. And it was just about, I feel like artists kind of get screwed over a lot. Like everybody wants art on their walls. Everybody wants to listen to music. Everybody wants to read a book. Everybody wants to experience the arts in some way. But
Yes.
people a lot of times they don't want to pay artists, and
Yeah.
the arts
Hmm.
kind of are the last thing on everyone's list because they think, oh, logically you don't have to have that. But I think this is me. I think the reason we do anything else in the world, the reason we work, the reason we want money, is to experience the arts, is so we can relax and watch that movie, or so we can drink that glass
Yeah.
of wine sitting in Italy, and
Hmm.
so that we can curl up with that good book. And so it was really just about celebrating the arts and trying to get them what was due to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
It's a great philosophy because let's face it, we work to have money for the essentials, of course, shelter, food,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt, provide for our
Right.
kids, and so forth like that.
Right.
But what do we work hard for? We work hard to go on vacation. We work hard so
Right.
we can go out to a nice dinner. We work hard so we can go to a concert, at the
Right.
ridiculous prices they are if we're seeing a big person. We work hard to get that big screen TV so I can watch my movies in, surround sound, or,
Right.
that I can go to, Barnes and Noble and spend $28 on a book. Yes, which my wife, every time we go away, my wife has to stop at a Barnes and Noble first because she wants that book for the airplane. She wants that book for sitting on the beach. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
get it, and you're absolutely right. And those people, unfortunately, you know, you do see a lot of. I do appreciate how it is a struggle for artists sometimes because you know,
Mm-hmm.
well now it's different with like Apple Music. But think about it: you'd get you back in the day, and I'm older than you. You'd buy a cassette tape, and someone would copy it. You'd buy a CD, and someone would copy it. So they have to pay for it. You bought a book. What
Yeah.
you do when you're done with the book? You gave it to your friend to read. You know,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate because obviously that doesn't benefit you. You might get more people who love your books, but you might have only sold one and 5 people read it,
Yeah. That's true. That is kind of the
and that's
nature of
tough.
it.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the nature of it,
And because of
unfortunately.
that, I
But
will
yeah,
buy my friend books that I like. I won't like, I tend to not regift books. And I think it's because I know. Like, I'm like, if I buy it for my
well,
friend, then the author's compensated. And plus, I worship my books. Like, they're all on my shelf. I mean, there's books right behind me that you can see right here.
mhm, yep,
So
yeah.
my books are kind of my little trophies. So, but yeah, no, that's the nature of the business for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my father-in-law, would read about 4 or 5 books a week. So now he's switched a little bit to, downloading them and so forth. But yeah, I mean, every time he came, there was a book in this room, book in this room, and I
Mm-hmm.
know certain people that read more than one book at one time, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
"What are you doing?"
Oh yeah. I don't understand that. I don't know how you no one at a time.
But it's no different than I could watch 2 different TV shows at the same time, not physically at the same time, but I could watch a series and a continuating series, not a stupid sitcom that doesn't have a continuity, but a show, especially now with streaming, that it carries over. So it's really watching just say a 10-hour movie in 10 1-hour clips. I can easily
That
after
makes
hour 3
sense.
go, well, let's
And
watch a different
when you
show, and I
say
can get
it,
that story.
that makes
What's that?
sense when you say it. It does. I said it makes sense when
Yeah,
you say it like that, but I still no way. One book at a time. I don't know. I connect more with a
yeah, no,
book. It can't. Yeah, I couldn't read 2 books at a time. No way. Yeah, I don't know
yeah.
why.
The other problem I
Yeah.
have with a book, for me, and this is probably why I don't read as often, is remembering what I read earlier, especially if I put the book down for a couple days. And I'm not talking like major details. I'm talking like
Hmm.
a character's who's which character. If there's multiple characters, oh, they're talking about John. Which one was John again? Or if they're I
Mm,
forgot what John the description of a John 3 chapters ago. I don't remember. Did John have black hair? You know, you get this picture in your head of someone, and by the next chapter, I've totally
nice.
forgotten what that person's supposed to look like. So to me, it's always like a struggle.
That's sparking. Yeah, you can put a book down for 2 whole days and not touch it.
Well, that's also probably a problem too. If I loved reading enough, I probably couldn't do that.
Most books, I have to like carve out time, like start them on a weekend or something, because once I'm reading it, I can't stop. And if it's not a book I love and I have to, then I read even faster to get it through because I still have to finish it. But because I
That's the
have
other
to
question I was
be
going to
able
say
to
to you.
give it a real, yeah.
How long are you willing to give a book? So not one of yours, and let's just say not a friend of yours book. So a book that someone recommended to you. You start reading it
Hmm.
a little slow. Realistically, are you going to force yourself to read through it, kind of like what I think you just said, or you be like, I can't continue this anymore. It's awful.
It's funny because I will shut down a show in like 3 minutes if it's not doing it for me.
Right.
But a book, I will finish it. I have to finish it. I might skim a couple boring parts, but I have to finish it because the big goal, then I have to write a Goodreads review on it. And I have to be able to read the whole thing, whether it's a 1 star or a 5 star review, because I
Yeah.
take a lot of joy in writing that review. So I have to finish it, but I wish I didn't.
But
I
if
don't
there
know,
wasn't a
just
review to
compelled to.
follow, if you weren't writing a review, and you
I
really did
think
not
I
like
would
a book
still,
60 pages in, you'd still read it through?
I think I'd have to. I think it's almost like an OCD thing. Like I have to do it.
I get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. My
Yeah.
my niece is a my niece is a fanatical reader, and she has her Instagram page where she reviews every book. You know, so
Hmm.
all her followers, and I guess people get recommendations off of it. And it's the same thing. Like she'll
Yeah.
give a book, a 1.5 out of 10. I'm like, well, why'd you keep reading it? And it was the same answer you just gave. Well, A, I wanted to see if it changed. B, I can't review a book if I don't read it. And obviously, her reviewing
Right.
is solely for fun. But
Oh
it's the
yeah.
same thing. And and you'll get through like I think last year was like 45 books, which is to me an amazing number of books in the course of a year. At that point you're
It's
reading three
pretty
or
good.
four books a month and you're working full time. That's pretty impressive to me.
It's pretty
You
good.
know, and it's amazing how things I don't even think about. And this is why I'm so impressed with you people that are like avid readers and critique it. Like, she'll say, from the cover I was inferring this, but was totally caught off guard, or the underlying theme was totally different than the ending. And that kind of was a pleasant
Yeah.
surprise as opposed to how I thought it was going to go because they set it up to go one way. When I read,
Right.
I'm just reading, hey, let's follow the story, see where it ends. And you and her have this
Oh
additional
yeah. No, I'm
passion or
deeply.
understanding of it, which I think
Yeah.
was so cool.
I'm analyzing it. Like, what is it? An archetype? Is this a certain trope? What's the theme? Or is it explorative? Is it speculative? Yeah. I want to dissect it like a frog and look at all the parts and see what's going on with it.
But you're
Diagnose
also
it.
reading it as a writer and not just
I
as a reader.
do. I'm such I always read as a writer. And even when I see certain, I'm rarely surprised by a book. Sometimes I am, but
Mhm.
usually I'm like, okay, the writer planted this here because of this goal. And then, okay, so this one's following a typical hero's journey like Odysseus. So we're at the peak of that. They're probably going to have some type of fall from grace. Like I can see all of those
Mhm.
things in it. So sometimes it almost spoils it a little, but then other times I'm like,
Yeah,
it gives me like mad respect for the author. Or I'm like, oh my God, I never thought of doing it that way. And that's really cool.
sure.
So, yeah, so that it's kind of a creative process, even when you're the reader experiencing it, because you're kind of like honing your craft sometimes when you're reading it.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
no,
and by
no
the
doubt.
way, what
So,
is your niece's? I want to
yeah.
know your niece's Instagram handle so I can follow her.
Oh, when we're done, I'll give it to you. I got to go pull it up.
Okay.
So I will definitely get
Okay.
it for you. Yeah, she would
Yeah,
love that.
but everybody, your
Uh,
audience would probably love to know it too.
yeah, all right. I'll find it as we're
You
talking. Next
don't
time I ask you
know
a
it off the
question
top
while
of
you're
your
talking, I'll
head.
go pull it up.
You
There you go.
don't know it off the top
I
of your
think I do
head.
know, but I don't want to give the wrong thing. I think it's her name loves books. I think is what it is. But I am going to verify that.
Yeah, you can
I
send
do
it
have
to me.
my phone
That's
here. I'll find it pretty quick. And what you said, but so I guess as we're wrapping up, I know people a lot of times I'm talking to people what I'll call in their entertainment world, and I think writers are obviously in that art/entertainment say, my
yep.
big break was this. Do you
Hmm.
feel you had something that was your big break, or do you still think that big break hasn't even come yet? Or do you not really believe in big breaks?
I've never thought about. I've okay. There's always another break. Even you're never at the top. Um,
Mhm.
even I don't care who you are. Brad Pitt could have another break, and I don't even know what that would be because he's had so many. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think there was a big break when I got my first book deal. I really do. That
Mhm.
someone paid to
That's fair.
publish my book and really legitimized my writing career. There was a smaller break before that when I became a professional writer, when I was a paid writer. I think the next big break, for me would be to be on the New York Times bestseller list. That's what I always would
Mhm.
consider like, wow, like that would be a big break. Um, and I would love to see my next book do that. So we'll see. But I think there's always, and then after that, a big break might be your book gets made into a movie. And then after that, maybe it wins an Oscar. You know what I mean? I mean, there's always a next
For sure,
level.
sure. There's always
Um,
that next level.
yeah. Somebody asked me one time, um she grew up with me and she said, I think you've had so much success, like from where we came from and what everybody else, everyone back home's really proud of what you do. And she says, you always seem like you don't think it's that big of a deal, like you're just so dissatisfied, and will you ever be satisfied? And I said, I'm not dissatisfied. I'm not. And I'm
Mhm.
blessed and I'm grateful, but I will never be full. I will never eat enough of this world to be full. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm both satisfied and dissatisfied. I'm like the Schrodinger's cat of satisfaction.
I actually know
I
what
am
that
both.
means.
Good.
I actually know that reference. And do you know how I know that
Yeah.
reference? Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love Big Bang. I'm obsessed. And they did do a
Yeah.
whole
I
like
had never heard that
about
before. And there's,
Leonard and Penny's
yes.
relationship.
And
It both was successful and unsuccessful. Yes.
correct.
Yep.
Yeah. See,
Yep.
if I didn't
So
watch TV, I would have no idea what you were talking about. You would have been way over my head. Yeah. But there you go. So the name of her Instagram is one word Julie Stern likes books.
okay. I will follow
And
her
she's
the
had
second
over
we're
the
done.
years, she's posted 140 books over the past few years.
Okay. I will send her my books and see what she thinks about mine.
Oh,
I'm gonna
that'd
connect
be
with her.
wonderful. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So
Get her
that's how I was
opinion.
going to kind of wrap this up. Tell us about the names of your books and just tell people where they
Okay.
can find them.
Um the first one is Tobacco Sun, like sun in the sky,
Mhm.
not sun in your arms. And the second is called
Yeah.
The Ocean at Night. And both of them are women's fiction with some elevated suspense. They're Southern.
Mhm.
One of them takes place back in the day, right after World War II, and one of them is current. So there, it's kind of depends on what your poison is, which one you will like. But both of them have a lot of twists and turns, but also underlying love stories, hints of romance. Lots to unpack. So I would appreciate anyone reading them. You can get them. Amazon's probably the most cost effective place to get them. You can get them at Barnes and Noble, things like that. They're in local indie stores if you're in the Charleston area. Always support indie bookstores, but Amazon otherwise.
Sure.
And just follow
Awesome.
me on Instagram. It's just my name at Lorna Hollifield. I love connecting with other readers and just other women who want to chat. So feel free.
Perfect. I will follow you, even though I'm not another woman. I will follow you anyway.
Awesome. No
Well,
men.
listen, I
No, I'm
really
just
enjoyed
kidding.
talking to you. I wish you nothing but continued success.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise.
And we'll definitely be following your career and hope to be seeing many more books in the next coming years.
Awesome. I hope it gets so big that you're like, I interviewed that girl. Oh, I can't believe
I
it.
remember
I hope
when.
I remember when. Yes. You see me,
That's right.
talking to Oprah or something. You're like, I know her.
Well, fingers crossed. That's my goal. So that's my wish for you.
Fingers crossed. All
Thanks for listening, everybody.
right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.